Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome for today's webinar, RbM idea from idea to implementation. I'm glad to welcome you today in this sunny day in Germany at least, and I would guide you through our agenda first. Our webinar will last for 1 hour. And during this webinar, we will cover the main topics concerning the risk-based monitoring, which will be as a practical guidance for you to start RbM in your organizations if you haven't started yet, or as a topic for consideration or for thinking about in terms of the implementation of risk-based quality management. And I'm glad to welcome today the colleague of mine, Dr. María Proupín-Pérez, who is a project leader at PPH Plus, and her career is connected very intensively with monitoring of clinical trials in general and the management of clinical trials. She finished her PhD in England in chemistry, and after that she continued with clinical trials, first of all as a CRA, lead CRA and project manager for various phases of clinical trials. So please use the chat which you see on the right side. If you have any connection connection problems, or if you don't hear me well, or if you have any additional wishes or questions during the webinar, we will try to address these questions during the session. Of course, some questions can go beyond the schedule, so we have 1 hour mostly for the main topics. So please understand that some questions could be addressed only after this hour. Of course, if there will be too many. There is an option to request a certificate after the webinar, and for that you have to actively ask for a certificate. It's made because we want your participation. We want you be sure that you really listened and you really were present on the webinar. So please request over email. The email you got as a reminder to just respond to this email, and you will get a certificate from our organizations. I myself dealing with technology in RbM, and I'm a manager of a company, Cyntegrity, and I will speak about technology domain today in more detail in the second half. So I'm switching off the video and let you concentrate on material. Please welcome Maria. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Artem, for this nice introduction. I will like to start with a question. Why risk-based management? And I'm saying management and not risk-based monitoring, because in order to implement risk-based monitoring, you should first implement a risk-based management approach. This means that risk-based monitoring is only one of the main 5 processes of risk management as defined by project management, by the project management manuals. So risk-based monitoring falls in the category of monitoring and control risks. And you cannot proceed with risk-based monitoring if you don't identify risk first. Yeah? So once I said this, I would like to start with a polling, with a survey regarding challenges that are related with the risk-based monitoring approach. So the question is, what main challenges do you see on the way of risk-based monitoring adoption? And then you can select multiple answers. The first definition A is definition of risk per trials. Definition with E, not with I, not with I. Then B, choice and interpretation of the right KRIs. Z, validation of the KRIs. KRIs stands for key risk indicators. D is change management and resistance. E, understanding of the risk-based monitoring concept. And F, other. So we wait a few seconds. What we want to address here is what you really need in order to implement risk-based monitoring, what you need to change, what you need to innovate, what is the effort you require to improve or to implement a risk-based management approach in your organization. And wait a little bit for the results. And here you find the results on your screen. So the main challenges found on the way of risk-based monitoring adoption are, in first place, with 24% of answers, we have a draw between answer C and answer D. This is the validation of the key risk indicators, which is related with technologies used and processes, validation of processes too. And the answer B is the choice and interpretation of the right KRIs. Very correct. This is a great challenge. You need to know what is really critical. How can you measure, effectively measure the critical risks? And then we have behind change management and resistance. I'm a bit surprised. I will expect this to be one of the main challenges, to be honest, because you need to change structures that have been used for years, and it requires quite an effort. And this is drawn with the definition of risks per trial, so risk identification, I would say, and understanding of the risk-based monitoring concept. Oh, it seems it's good. It seems that everybody is already aware of what is meant by risk-based monitoring, and only 6% are considering other factors. I think this is quite relevant. We have validation of KRIs and choice and interpretation of the right KRIs. I think Artem will go through these topics in the second part of this webinar in more detail. I am focusing now in two phases of, on the two main phases of, as detailed in our title of the webinar. First, implementation, and secondly, first planning, the idea, and then secondly, the implementation of risk-based monitoring. So why risk-based monitoring? I start again. We want to control timelines and the budget efficiently first. And this is enhanced when you know the risks that are threatening them. So secondly, you have to add quality already in the project planning phase in the study protocol. You will avoid pitfalls and risks by the design of the right protocol, for example. Then you will enhance the allocation of tasks to your study team, and with this you will have a number of people adequate to the effort required to complete tasks, as well as you will target the monitoring strategies on those risks that require more attention, those tasks that are more threatening. And finally, you will improve leading and directing. With a risk-based managerial approach, you will enhance control of the project and improve the chances to have success. So let's talk about a bit of history. In a survey conducted, I'm showing here the results of a survey conducted in the year 2013, and this was published in Applied Clinical Trials. Project managers were asked what are the key, most relevant characteristics for achieving project management success. And most of them, in pharma and CROs, answer communication skills. These were the most important skills. However, risk awareness was reduced to 3% of the pharma industry responses and to 1% of the CRO's responses. The situation today is quite different. This has been a change induced by the new draft addendum to the ICH GCP guideline that was in 2015, and it will enter. It will be implemented in 2016, most probably. And it is clearly stated that the sponsor should develop a systematic, prioritized, risk-based approach to monitoring clinical trials. Now, this is mandatory. You should note your risks. And secondly, this was already announced in 2013 by the EMA and the FDA in their risk-based quality management and monitoring guidance. They already said they are searching for a risk-based quality management and monitoring approach that is tackling directly human subjects and data quality issues. So why? They want to take advantage of the new technologies available as well as the new quality management systems. These should not be interpreted as less vigilance of the clinical study, but the way around. It's enhanced vigilance with better access to data remotely and to other analytical tools and more, I would say, a coherent approach to focus efforts on what really matters. So we start with quality planning. Yeah? Risk-based monitoring starts with quality planning. And I would like to remark three different aspects. The first one is the aspect of management. So you need to plan correctly. You have to produce a protocol where you are avoiding risk from its early design. You want to be quality by design, just mitigating risks with the right data collection procedures, for example, and making use of the technologies that enable you a better control over the data, overview, etc. So the second aspect is the study oversight. Here you will need to prepare a risk-based management plan, I would say a risk management plan to be more accurate, and a tailored risk-based monitoring plan which should be reconciliated with the risk management plan. And finally, you need to check the technologies that are available. And you should take advantage of these centralized systems. The remote access to data is one of the most revolutionary tools you will be able to take advantage from, as well as systems to communicate risks timely and efficiently across your team members. So here I would like to show the complexity and where the weight of the risk-based evaluation is. So the greatest weight is on the planning phase. You need to do an effort, a greater effort during the planning phase. You need to be able to identify risk and to prioritize risk from the project planning phase based on the feasibility of your study in the protocol-specific risks, In the partners, you need to conduct the study successfully, the quality of documents you require and you are really obtaining. What is the project team, the qualifications you required to avoid pitfalls in the conduct phase. Then the site feasibility, do you have performance data that will be indicating if a site may operate, perform correctly or not. And of course, IMP related characteristics that may be specific for your study and the clinical supplies demands and the logistics involved. So in the conduct phase, you actually implement this your risk-based monitoring plan, and you need to continuously improve it. Once you implement it, you will see if the site monitoring is successfully performed or not. If there are still pitfalls, you should review your plan and improve it. The CAPA process is now included in the ICH GCP addendum as a required process. So before it was not mentioned, now the CAPA process is a new addition of the ICH GCP addendum, for example. And you should be able to have some kind of performance indicators for personnel of the CROs and other vendors that are taking part in the study. You should be able, very importantly, to overview safety data and data related to endpoints. And already in the project management level, leaving the study level, going a bit further to the study management level, you will be able to control progress and to provide forecasts that may prevent you from situations where you see already that something will not work in the future. And this is requiring cross-functional effort from your team. Communication across different functions is now key for getting a successful implementation of risk-based monitoring. So what is changing now? The evolution to the risk-based monitoring approach is now starting with the identification of critical processes. Critical processes at two different levels. At the system level, which is independent from the clinical study, that are the technologies that you have available, your cooperation partners, the established procedures, and then at the study level, you have your risks, critical processes associated to your clinical study protocol. And from there, you have to identify critical data and develop a tailored monitoring plan that will tackle human subject protection risk and data integrity risks. What should you always include in the clinical monitoring plan? You should determine the responsibilities. You should make sure that the qualification is appropriate for the assigned function. The methods and the rationale for use of each method. This is including on-site and centralized or remote monitoring. The training requirements, which can be very different depending on the nature of your study. If you have many procedures that are going further to different to the standard of care, you will need to make sure you train your investigators thoroughly as well as your monitors. And the policies and procedures you will implement are also very, very important. So what are clinical processes and critical data? Well, as these critical processes represented below, this big box below, are always critical. And these are the informed consent process, how you select patients, how you obtain their informed consent, how you implement randomization procedures and blinding. You should make sure that they are not, that the assignments of medication are, the assignment of medication is correct, that you are not giving placebo to patients that should be receiving active medication, and blinding procedures to avoid bias in the evaluation of results of your study. Likewise, you should be careful with the data collection procedures that you will be implementing. That is directly related with the access of data, how accessible your data will be, if you will have an electronic CRF, for example, or not, and study specific procedures that are inherent to your protocol. These are critical. You need to you need to really address this to analyze these processes, and in a second step, you should identify all the critical data which is directly related to or threatening these critical processes. And the first one block of critical data is the data related with subject eligibility, inclusion, exclusion criteria, and secondly, the primary and secondary endpoints, how you're going to adjudicate data, and how you're going to define good results, for example, based on your statistical analysis. And third place, safety data. The safety outcomes, if you have over-reporting or of SIEs, may jeopardize your study, for example. And
Maria, sorry for interruption. I think there is a question which can really refer to what you are just saying. We have a question from Mr. Prabhu. Can you say examples of human subject protection risks and data integrity risks? And I noticed that for example, the safety data or safety serious adverse events isn't is an example for human protection risks, or could you name something else?
Yes, certainly. Safety data is one example of human subject protection. The quick and timely reporting of adverse events may avoid other patients to be exposed to a medication that might be hurting them. Yeah? So this is a case of human protection risk. Another example for data integrity risks is, as I mentioned, the bias, that you break the blind process and then the investigators have a bias and they give a better evaluation of for example, the clinical evaluation of a patient is better than it really is. Yeah? So they somehow provide non-reliable data, or for example, that data related with endpoints will not be correctly entered in the CRF because the CRF design is incorrect. For example, no? Exactly. I'm seeing now a comment. I believe even improper informed consent administration can also be an example of subject protection risk. Right, this is correct. I had today an example. We had an informed consent form where the patient was not clearly giving consent for the review of his data or her data by the clinical monitor. It should be stated by law in the informed consent form that the patient is allowing a third person to get access to their confidential data, and that was not included in an informed consent form. For example, this is something that is threatening the human subject rights and safety. Not only safety, but also human rights. Yeah. Good. Once I said that we have identified critical data, you need to prepare a risk-based approach to monitoring that is really focusing on this critical data, and then you can somehow be flexible and relax a bit with regard to the monitoring of other risks. Sorry. One of the greatest advantages of risk-based monitoring is the use of remote monitoring. This is only possible if you have, well, not only possible, could be possible without analytical and visualization tools, but then you may add an extra risk. Instead of avoiding risk, you may be adding risk due to the fact that all the information will come with a delay to your desk. So I will really recommend to rely on new technologies. The use of electronic systems for data capture is one of the greatest advantages of our time. And these analytical and visualization tools from remote locations will increase on-site visit efficiency by means of focusing or targeting visits on issues that have been observed, or by the suspicion of sloppiness at one side or in another. So you will adjust the frequency of visits and the extent of on-site source data verification by means of data that is available, by means of analysis of data that has been performed already from a centralized location. And one aspect that is very important too is to enhance project management efficiency. So it's not only on the clinical study level that you will get an advantage, but also at project management level, at project level, you will be able to enhance the CRO oversight, for example, if you see the quality of reports obtained, etc. This will help you as well to enhance control over the monitoring activities and any other activities related to with the study. In the next slide, I'm talking about central monitors. Who are the central monitors? And the central monitors are not only the clinical monitors, are not only the clinical research associates, as represented here on top, on the right side. Now you have a medical monitor that may have access to data remotely. For example, safety events that have been reported by electronic data capture systems that may be already directly sent to the medical monitor nearly at the same time that the investigator has found them. Right? Then the data manager will have better access and timely access to data. And the statistician may already provide feedback. So you will have automated and manual queries cleaning data much efficiently and much faster as when you're doing it with papers, CRFs, for example. And the figure of the project manager is forgotten in many publications. I'm always surprised that they speak about all these functions and they never mention the project manager when they speak about central monitors. And the project manager is playing a key role in central monitoring too. So here I have a slide that is called the team, and this is an order for the team. Your team is the most valuable thing. It doesn't matter if you have a great tool, great technologies, great processes. If you have a bad team, the project will be a catastrophe. And if you have back technologies and really constrained process definition of processes, if you have a good team, your study will be still a success. So the team is the most important thing. You should really make sure you have the right qualifications. It's not the same to have a phase 3 than a phase 4 trial. You will need a different level of expertise from the different partners. You need to check the availability, for example, the calendars of people. We are expecting somebody to leave the project. In this case, I have represented it with a woman with a baby. Then you should check that the work is allocated correctly, that you don't have somebody with a high weight of work, like this poor worker that is exhausted. That there are other partners that are, have a lot of free time, and they may have a better role, a better, they could improve their productivity. And what you want to avoid is this bomb here, where you have somebody that has the wrong skills, it's not qualified, it's not correctly trained, has not received the right information at the beginning. This you should avoid it. Yeah? So it is very important to have someone as the manager that have the right coordination and communication skills. You should have the right communication and coordination skills, but also you should find a team with the required technology knowledge and technical background required for performing their functions. So again, and related with this, before implementing risk-based monitoring, you should check your project management team. You should make sure that you have in the function of the risk manager, you should make sure that you have a very experienced person, a very experienced project manager, a medical leader that will help you with the identification of risk and will help you with the coordination of your team, especially when you start implementing risk-based monitoring. Then you should make sure you have evaluated data from completed and current projects that will help you to prevent and mitigate risks that are already known with the responses that have proved to be more effective. And then you should adapt your risk-based quality management system according to this historic information and the assets that you have in hand. And make use of evidence-based risk indicators. For example, what metrics will help you to evaluate site performance, to evaluate what is over-reporting or under-reporting of serious adverse events, for example. Use this to make sure you implement the right monitoring approach in your new study. The corporate philosophy is also very important. You should make sure that business and organizational models are adapted, synchronized with the methods you will use in your clinical study. And all these assets, organizational assets should be taken in consideration before you jump into risk-based monitoring. So again, you need to make sure you are planning quality. You should add quality by design before jumping into risk-based monitoring. So you need to make sure your risk-based approach is allowing you to adapt it with clear definitions of when should be changed and how you will change it according to each situation, as concise and as accurate as possible. And then adjust your procedures, the documents coherently so that you avoid risks by bad quality already from definitions, processes, and documents. And finally, you will need to optimize operational productivity. You should make sure you have, if possible, and I think this is nearly a must, a centralized monitoring capacity that is allowing you to target and focus your monitoring strategy on relevant risks. And then you should also train the team, make sure you have a team trained and qualified for implementing a risk-based monitoring approach. So regarding once you have the idea how you implement, so you should start making sure you have a strategy to measure risks. You should use risk indicators. These are you need to use some metrics. For example, the number of screening failures per month, how many screening failures you have at the site at a certain point, the rate of withdrawals, how many patients have been withdrawn, the rate of SIs reported. Are SIs over-reported or under-reported? A comparison between or across sites, a metric that allows you to, for example, statistics that allow you to compare sites within and across sites. For example, patients. You can compare data from patients within a site to see if there is the expected variability or not. These are very valuable risk indicators for you to know where to focus your efforts once you go to sites to perform source data verification. And once you have done this, you should check the effectiveness of your approach. And for the effectiveness of your approach, you will see if you're really avoiding risk or if you are timely responding to risks. Yeah? And finally, you will need to complete a whole study to check the costs and the time efficiencies that you won by this strategy. And finally, I would like to commend the great plus on risk-based management. You should start with right planning, correct planning, with effective project leadership to make sure that the planning is correctly implemented with the first objective of safeguarding health and rights of subjects. The medical expert will help you to add quality, validity, and integrity of data. And then on the conduct phase, you will make sure that the data obtained and is correct. The oversight of the CRO will be also part of the study oversight, and the risk-based study management approach will enable you to control the budget and the completion of tasks timely. And you will have a kind of a continuous improvement, checking that your plans are correctly implemented, as well as any changes that should be implemented are implemented in time. Then in the end, the objective is to attain stakeholder satisfaction. And the final objective of risk-based monitoring, of course, is to enhance quality and reduce unproductive efforts. That's the main objective of risk-based monitoring. Thank you very much, Artem. I think I went over my time. Apologies for this. I'm pleased to announce Artem's presentation now.
Thank you, everybody, for attention. We have to skip one polling of questions. Anyway, I would like to ask you a question about RbM technology, whether you are using it already or not. Just see on your screen a question. What is the percentage of ongoing clinical studies in your organization that are taking advantage of remote available data? So none of them, less than 25%, from 25 to 75, or more than 75%, or even all of them. I must say I'm a bit surprised by the results. There is a golden needle chosen. 75% of answers take actually advantage in 25 to 75% of their studies, which is quite surprising. That's what we are going to discuss today, especially if you are more interested into making this rolling out the technology on all the studies. Please don't forget to ask questions in the chat on the right side during the presentation, and If we'll have no time, then we will address the questions over emails later. One important point, what was mentioned in GCP addendum, which Maria already referred to, is that the emerging advances in technology may facilitate the remote monitoring of source data when appropriate.
The polling is stuck and covering your presentation. You need to close the polling.
Yeah, just a moment. That means that ICH organization already assumes that technology is an essential part in risk-based quality management. When we take a look on a very simplistic, very simplistic overlook or and comparison between traditional monitoring, where monitors go into sites, visiting them regularly, making SDV almost 100%. In remote monitoring, such strategies as reduced, centralized, triggered, targeted monitoring became available. But technology is taking care about this area. So technology keeps documented risk profiles of sites or even certain processes. That is like a guidance to a monitor. Okay, these sites should be monitored more than, for example, here could be reduced monitoring. As a very simplistic overview, but it gives again a hint what we are speaking about. If you will take a look on all the possible risks, I must say they change a bit. There are some fixed risks that stay fixed for the whole trial length. For example, toxicity, geography. So these risks do not change during a clinical trial too much. Of course, toxicity could be changed through dosage, but usually we deal with the same toxicity profile. These we call study level risks. So these risks could be assessed even before trial starts. Next level, these are more dynamic risks. So they can escalate or de-escalate during a trial, just a bit in more dynamic manner. Site level means that sites are a very important part of these risks. So, for example, primary investigator of a site could change, and immediately a risk profile of a site changes. Most dynamic risks are so-called operational risks. So these are the risks which are very connected with visits, measurements, with the assessments, questionnaires, and so on and so forth. So they change very dynamically, very rapidly. So they escalate or de-escalate. And why we are speaking about this? Because the approach to each of the type of the risk could be different or should be different. So study level risk could be assessed before trial starts and reassessed, for example, in the middle. But these levels, these areas should be addressed again and again during the trial. When we speak about risks detection or the early detection, it's not only about it. So the detection is an essential part, and it starts, as I said, even in planning phase, or as Maria actually mentioned, but detection is only first stage. So issue management and categorization of all the issues is absolutely crucial. So if you will be bombarded with thousands of messages, your team will be ignoring them already after a month or so. So clear issue management, escalation logic, is absolutely essential as well. But what you do with the issue, actually, you should eliminate the issue or create a mitigation plan so that the issue will not appear anymore in your trial. So mitigation process. Last but not least, you share the information among everybody, among your team members, or with your future, with the future trials. So knowledge exchange is absolutely crucial as well.
Artem, I would like to address a question that somebody asked. Can you please provide examples of operational risks which are very dynamic in nature?
Yes, I will. I would be very happy to do this. Very typical operational risks is fraud. This is something what can escalate immediately or very rapidly. Fraudulent behavior overall. It could come from patients, it could come from sites, or even come, and when I'm speaking about fraud, it could be even not fraud in a like criminal sense, but even sloppiness.
Also misconduct.
Misconduct. Yeah. So misconduct, sloppiness. These are operational risks that escalate fast, and you should do something about it very fast as well.
I would like to provide a quick example that is found very often, and that is, for example, withdrawal, the rate of patient withdrawals. That's something that may happen very quickly, and then you have patients dropping out of the study very quickly. And that's something you have to keep under watch very closely.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Maria. When we speak about creation a risk defense strategy before a trial starts, you could start with the protocol and take a look what primary and outcome measures, secondary outcome measures are the most essential for you. Around them, you could you could select sponsor-specific risks. So these are risks which happened with you, with a sponsor or CRO in the past. So what you know already. Study-specific risks, for example, if you have oncology or ECG-related trial, then there could be risk indicators concerning these therapy areas. You can base everything on protocol compliance. Of course, create such important areas like safety and patient rights. Recruitment and milestones are absolutely essential to monitor as well. This could be grouped as a project management risks, and base everything, of course, on fraud detection. So this is the approach that we would recommend in order to create a risk management plan, for example, and selection of the risk indicators. When we speak about available RbM technologies on the market, we can we can select number of features to use in order to categorize them. For example, they differ by IT infrastructure, they differ by data sourcing. Some of them are more EDC specific, some are CTMS driven, but even more intestine systems are becoming available. Assessment frequency, to my mind, is a very important parameter. Sometimes they assess once and you get a report, or a continuous assessment, which I think a bit more logical. By functions, of course, and by risk areas. But let's take a look on the available technologies landscape. So you see that some of the technologies are more focused on RbM, and some of them are more generic. On the x-axis, you see that some technologies are more dependent, so to say, because they are involved in the data acquisition. And some of them are independent. For example, that they are only focused on quality, on risk management. I have to say that independence is some parameter that you should consider. When a company is involved in the data acquisition, usually they are reluctant to transparently communicate all the risks. Why it is? Because they could be a part of the problem. The solution for that is really independent quality assessments. There are more chances to get more objective assessments on this axis. If you use a part of the standard approach, for example, from Medidata, it doesn't mean that it is bad. It just saying that there is a conflict, could be conflict of interests. And this is, again, my personal opinion, but feel free to share your comments on that. Importantly to understand that risk assessment and data quality assessments are quite a bit different topics. They are very connected with each other, but the approaches to evaluate them are different. So take a look that data quality assessment should be part of the RbM, but it demands a specialized strategy. For risk assessment, we advise to use a simple approach like FMEA, which is well known, and integrate this approach with risk indicators. For example, as you see on the screen. Site ranking allows you to use such strategies as trigger-rated or targeted monitoring. That's actually where some cost-saving potentials can happen, but please do not target this as a main reason why you start the RbM. Now let us step back and think what could be done in order to embrace RbM technology or RbM in general. First of all is to start a pilot. Just start small first. The pilot allows you to understand what gaps you have. Involve early adopters from your team, already those people who are willing to participate, who just have the energy, create stories, analyze what went wrong, analyze what went good in your implementation, and share the stories with everybody. Provide the roadmap for next step, and the next step is to incorporate lessons learned from the pilot into the more wider area. So communicate the mistakes and successes, publish case studies, communicate the stories, and be prepared for full deployment. And the full deployment will cover all the tools and processes which you are usually using. Changes are implemented to support the new procedures, and the goal is to integrate the quality oversight strategy for the whole organization. Summing up what we just told today, and we have a couple of minutes for that. Think that risks could be different. Think from, you can create your own methodology how you divide them, but please address different risks appropriately. Treat fixed and dynamic risks differently. By the way, for fixed risks, you can use a standard methodology like RACT, Risk Assessment and Categorization Tool, which is freely available from Transcellerate Group. The selection of indicators must be guided by actually by good clinical practice, by patient safety, by protocol, and by common sense. Do not select many risk indicators because you will lose your time and efficiency by observing thousands of graphs. 20, it might maybe even like my gut feeling again. In our experience, 2025 is already upper boundaries. Combination of risk indicators can tell you the full story. So integrate the information from many of them, like Maria was mentioning, adverse events, loss to follow-ups. These indicators together can explain you what really happened in the sites. Please don't forget that RbM has always residual risks. So that's something that can go wrong, but you will never even imagine. And these residual risks must be taken into consideration as well. Tools are essential, but your team is the most important. So be focused on your team. And just remember, technology solutions vary a lot. So just find a solution which suits your needs, suits your team, what you are comfortable with, and this solution will be the right one. There is no golden. This is what makes you efficient. And when implementing RbM, apply a stage approach: pilot, then lessons learned, and then full deployment. If you are not sure that you can do this, bring external expertise. So this is my last piece of advice, and I will be happy to answer any questions. We have exhausted actually all the time we planned today. And please understand that if you have any questions, we will use time extra for that.
Thank you, Artem, for this review of technologies. That has been very useful. We had a question again regarding what data sources you use for pooling risk from independent solutions. And I tried to answer it. You have to distinguish between the EDC provider, the electronic data capture provider, and the risk scanning solution. And I would like Artem to clarify this in more detail.
Actually, it's a very good question. Recently, Transcellerate selected 12 data sources which they consider relevant for risk assessments. Under these data sources, such sources like EDC, CTMS, IVRS, pharmacovigilance, lab data, and some others are listed. And all of them, altogether, all of them provide risk-relevant information. So when designing a risk indicator, consider that not only EDC, but also other recording systems could be very valuable sources for your risk assessment. Even financial information. These are also risks for trial. That's what I want to say, considering this. What you, Maria, mentioned, of course, EDC provider integrate the so-called RbM modules, but please do not forget that this is only limited to EDC as a source. And why you're not using, for example, safety database, which is again very, very useful, contains very useful risk-relevant information.
I would like
to say?
We should say thank you to everybody that has participated in this webinar. We have observed that we are over the time already, and we will continue answering questions for 5 minutes while all of you agree, but we understand that some of you need to leave. So thank you very much for your participation to the ones that have to leave at the moment.
Thank you from my side as well. And please do not forget that there is an option to get a certificate if you want. So do we have any question else?
I would like to clarify a bit further this question regarding the sources, the data sources. What it's offered with some risk scanning tools is that they get data from the management level, from study project management level. For example, timelines. They may be able to give you trigger alerts if they see the budget. The forecast for budget use is going to be overrun in a few months. You can even get alerts prospectively before you really face a risk. So you can react on time using preventive actions, and this system may allow you as well to check data that has been collected by monitoring reports, data that is directly integrated in the database that has been collected. It doesn't matter if it is with paper or with electronic CRF, and then you have data from the clinical trial management system, which may tell, for example, how many patients a site has included and so on. So you have many different sources, data sources, that could be a scan with a system, with a technology that will enable to trigger alerts to the right communication partner so that you are able to implement preventive and corrective actions as required. When you have a system that is a CRO, for example, a CRO that is providing itself the ADC system, it might be that they have a conflict of interest because they are providing you alerts of something that is not working related with their own performance. So it might be that you find some conflict of interest there.
Thank you, Maria. Exactly that's what I meant as well. I think that the question from my perspective is covered, is answered. If you have, dear participants, if you have any comments or wishes how we can improve the webinars, please also share them over emails, and we will be happy to answer to your comments. I would like to thank everybody. I really see that there is a lot of interest and very deep-going questions, and that actually means for me that the topic is important, and that means actually that these webinars could help in order to understand maybe some aspects of the risk-based monitoring. Of course, in order to get a more and better and deeper dive, much more time is needed. I would like to thank everybody from my side, and welcome everybody to join us on other webinars that we usually publish on our websites. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your attention.